Hello again, this is Pastor Tim Brewer coming to you from Bend and Lomita United Methodist Churches in Central Texas. We're here in these small communities serving God just like the big churches, only we do it better. We're talking about Bible stories, some of the stories in the Bible that you may be familiar with, but some people are not familiar with. One that you probably heard from long ago, if you grew up in Sunday school, you heard it, is Jonah and the big fish. We call it Jonah and the whale because we figured that's the only fish big enough to swallow somebody, but the Bible doesn't say that. Let's get back to the story. It starts out with Jonah is spoken to by God. God said, I want you to go to the Ninevites, to Nineveh, and preach to the Ninevites. And Jonah said no, he wasn't going to do that because he didn't like the Ninevites. They were people who had invaded Israel. They were considered enemies. They were not Jewish. They were a pagan people. And he just didn't want to go to Nineveh. And so he figures that he will go as far away from God as he can get. And so he gets on a boat and sails away. There was the idea in the ancient world that your God was just the God of your territory. And if you went to war and you defeated somebody, some other army, is because your God was stronger than their God. So many people believed you could get away from God, from your God. And so Jonah got on a boat and sailed into the Mediterranean. He is mostly pagans, it's mostly non-Jewish people. It had a variety of religions on board the ship. And the great storm came up. And people began to ask, well, how did this happen? Who made their God mad? And Jonah said, I think I did. And they said, well, we're not going to do anything. We're going to try real hard to save the boat. And so they worked real hard in a way that showed hospitality and caring much more than Jonah had shown. And eventually, it looked like the ship was going to sink, so they figured they had to throw Jonah overboard in the ocean. Along came a fish because the chances of surviving in a storm in the middle of the Mediterranean are not very good. And so the whale actually swallows Jonah and saves him. Takes him a 3 days journey. In those 3 days, he had a chance to reflect on his theory of the divinity and what God has called him to do and to be. And so the whale spit him up on the shore. And Jonah says, all right, well, I'll go to Nineveh. He goes to Nineveh. It's a 3-day journey into the center of town. Now, that is a huge city. If it takes you 3 days to walk from the edge of town to the middle, that is huge. And he begins to say, you're all going to die. There's nothing you can do. You're doomed. God's going to cause judgment upon you, and you're all going to die. And the people hear him and believe him. And the king down to the peasants were all repentant. They were sorry, and even the cows wore sackcloth and ashes. The dogs and the cats were repentant. And God decides not to cause judgment upon them. And Jonah goes out on the hill and he starts to pout. I knew you were going to do that. You're just a forgiving God, and I didn't want the Ninevites forgiven. And so he's sitting there in the hot sun, and a tree grows up and shades him and gives him a little bit of comfort, but then the tree dies. And he's mad at God again for causing the tree to come up and then to die. And God says, I'll be merciful to who I want to be merciful for. It's not your business how much mercy I have. I am merciful to people that you don't know. I'm merciful to people that you don't like. I'm a merciful God. So the story is to tell us that we can't run away from God. And God is extremely merciful even to people who are not like us. even to people we don't like, maybe even hate. Did the story of Jonah and the whale actually happen? Well, it's true. Whether it happened or not, it's fundamentally true. You can't run away from God. And God is a merciful God. That is always true. And so that's why Jonah and the whale is a true story. I'll see you next time.